Explain to the jurors what they're looking at.
So on the left part, you are looking at a frame from the high-speed video just after the contact with the taillight. On the right, you're looking at the post-damage to the taillight after the glass had been fired into it.
Okay. And what are we looking at here?
Same thing on the left. Again, this is the 37-mile-an-hour test. The glass striking just in the area where the bottom of the turn signal indicator is, so right where it meets the red portion of the lens and the clear portion of the lens. That's about where the impact point was. You could see that a large portion of the outer red assembly, lens cover is missing and fractured. The clear portion of the part of the outer lens to the turn signal indicator is also fractured, as well as the underlying clear diffusers in that assembly.
Would your testing in both of these scenarios, the 31-mile-an-hour test and the 37-mile-an-hour test, represent an accepted methodology for controlling for aim, velocity, impact site? Based on your review of Dr. Welcher's reports and his data, what testing did Dr. Welcher undertake or conduct?
So he did, initially it appeared that he did a static test, if you will, just demonstrating holding his right arm out adjacent to the rear taillights on the right side of an exemplar Lexus to demonstrate his theory of how the arm contacted the taillight.
Now, the way Dr. Welcher was standing, this is what the taillight would look like if it actually hit him holding that cocktail glass, and it still would not leave bite marks in his arm or in the sleeve of the sweatshirt.
What is a static test?
Well, in a static test, that neither the arm or the vehicle is moving. It's just he's aligning his right arm adjacent to show how his arm aligns to the geometry and the dimensions of the Lexus.
Did Dr. Welcher appear to be wearing similar clothing as John O'Keefe was wearing on January 29, 2022?
Yes.
Was there any significance or purpose for that, in your opinion?
In this test, no.
No, he was just wearing the clothes like John O'Keefe to make the jury feel that it would add more validity to the test.
The only thing that this demonstrates is that you can get your right arm to align with the taillight. Beyond that, it doesn't tell you anything with respect to what happens to the arm when it makes contact with the taillight, right? What's the motion of the arm? What's the damage to the taillight? What's the acceleration of the arm? What's the forces of the arm? So it doesn't answer any of those other questions. The only question it answers is, does the arm align with the taillight? So this is an extracted frame from one of his dynamic tests in which the vehicle is moving at about 2 miles per hour into his arm, making contact with his hand, his forearm, and his elbow.
Did Dr. Welcher conduct any testing to determine whether the damage to Ms. Reed's Lexus was consistent with the striking of an arm of a pedestrian?
I'm not aware of any impact testing that he did, no.
Did Dr. Welcher conduct any testing to determine the forces necessary to cause the damage to the taillight of Ms. Reed's vehicle?
Not that I'm aware of, no.
Did Dr. Welcher conduct any testing to determine the forces necessary to cause the injuries to John O'Keefe's arm?
No, not that I'm aware of.
Did Dr. Welcher provide any opinions as it relates to the speed of the subject Lexus at the time of the alleged incident?
No, from reviewing his report and his PowerPoint and analysis, I could not find anywhere in it a specified speed or even a range of speeds.
Now, we've all seen this picture before, and that taillight has 0 water spots inside of it, 0 salt spots inside of it, and 0 sand debris inside of it. And when they took it apart, they said nothing came out of the taillight, which water should have came out of it if it was actually exposed to snow and melting snow.
Did you consider this photograph in coming to your opinions and conclusions?
Yes.
What, if anything, of significance did you note about this taillight other than the fact that it's damaged?
Well, I'm going to jump to the next slide, if you will. So this is now the taillight obviously has been removed from the vehicle. So obviously what's important here is looking at what is the damage that we have to this taillight. What components were damaged in this alleged interaction. So we're looking at the clear diffuser at the bottom is fractured and missing. Same with the ones on the vertical side. The majority of the outer red lens is also missing and fractured. And then on the back side, we also have some damage in terms of some fracturing to that black plastic, and there's also a chunk of plastic missing on the top portion of the taillight as well.
ARCCA did a phenomenal job, and I'm not criticizing their work whatsoever. In fact, it's rather impressive. I just want to touch on a few things about the taillight that maybe the jury would like to know, or maybe they should have known, or maybe it should have been described a little bit better, maybe a level where everyday people can understand what's really going on with the taillight. When he did the slower test where it was on the machine, it just kind of punched out and hit the taillight where it was not mounted into a car. There's a flaw with that test, and I learned that through breaking several of these taillights. And I think this is one of them included. When it's not on a fixture where it is substantially mounted, the bottom is extremely weak. The side on the lift gate is extremely weak because this is just a thin piece of plastic. And then this whole side is extremely weak. See how the bottoms broke off on this one? The sides also broke off. I just have it taped together for this demonstration. This is the one that got hit. I think I hit it 14 times, and a total of 19 pieces broke off of it. And the last several strikes were as hard as I could hit it. The bottom of the taillight is extremely weak if it is not mounted in such a way as it would be in the vehicle. And the side, see how thin that side piece is? It is super thin, so it's super weak. And it's just regular plastic, it's not reinforced. However, the taillight housing is reinforced. And I wish they would have touched on this top corner. This top corner where it all comes together is extremely strong. And when it's in the vehicle, all of this is encased pretty much inside of the vehicle with maybe a 1 or 2 millimeter gap. All of that creates an even stronger taillight. So when it's mounted into the vehicle, all of this is surrounded, and then the truck, the SUV actually has mounting points that mount the bottom and mount the side wing, that I like to call it a side wing, but the side piece of the taillight. There's one there and one there that it slides into, and it kind of clips in to reinforce the side of the taillight so it doesn't break so easy. On a new non-broken taillight, there's a clip right there where it clips in. There's a clip right here where it clips in. On the bottom there's 2 where it clips in. And then there's the Christmas tree things that go into a rubber garment. And then 2 bolts here. So once this is all mounted in a truck, all this stuff is extremely rigid. And then the side piece is extremely rigid. So on the slower test where they used the mechanism that just punched the taillight out, that was one of the flaws I was talking about. The actual taillight would have held up a lot better had it been mounted in a stronger rig. When I mounted mine, or for my testing, I made it out of steel and stainless steel. The actual ram part here was stainless, That's stainless. That's regular steel, and then that's stainless. And I welded it all together so this supports the side of the taillight, and this bracket supports the bottom. And the way I mounted the taillight so it would be as rigid as possible is I used actual JB weld. The JB weld will adhere really good to any surface as long as it's roughed up enough. So you just rough it up a little bit and it'll stick, but you can also remove it. But it will hold through at least 1 or 2 impacts most of the time. But another thing I want to go over, which they haven't talked about in trial yet, hopefully they will, is the spots inside of the taillights. This one was the one that was in the snow. We'll go over that one first. As you can see, the salt leaves spots that are extremely noticeable. In fact, it's probably etching into the plastic a little bit. But it is all throughout the taillight, even inside of the taillight, because those spots are microscopic pretty much, and they go everywhere. Those spots are microscopic and they go through all the little nooks and crannies. You can see it all the way through the bottom of the board. The salt water even gets inside of the housing, and when they pulled it into the Sally port, she said nothing fell out of the taillight except for pieces of the taillight. In real life, if it was out in the elements, this little pocket and the pocket back here, the way it mounts into the vehicle, if the lens was really broken outside, would have trapped water in it when the snow melted. Both taillights that I've had wet in the exact correct condition that it sits in the vehicle, when you pull it out, if this thing really was in the elements in the snow, it would have had water pour out of it. This part would have trapped water, and see, this is where the salt got onto the board and has actually started to corrode it, as well as this part. The way that water from the road whips up behind a car, it gets in every single thing. I would have expected 1/8 to 1/4 of a cup of water to pour out of the salt out of the taillight when it was removed in the Sally port. Here's the one that was just road water. There was no salt on the street. As you can see, the water leaves pretty much the exact same spots, but they're just smaller and they don't etch into the plastic. But those spots carry through to the back of the board because it goes through all the little cracks. See how the diffuser looks just kind of not shiny because of the water spots. This taillight also had water pour out of it. The taillight, I wish they would have discussed this more in the trial. This housing is extremely strong because that's where all the corners come together. Because that's where the 90-degree angle is in the taillight right here. That makes it extremely, extremely strong. Extremely strong. And to blow the back of this housing out, it probably took it off a good 1.5 to 2 inches downward this way, and probably a good 2.5 to 3 inches over toward this way and then down. And there's no way an impact could hit that separate module, break all of this off, break the border that holds it in, and then it has that strong clear plastic to push it back into breaking this, because this is all reinforced. And when it's in the truck, all of this is encased into the actual vehicle with the metal fender and the natural turns of the contours of the truck. New unbroken taillight. So it would have to break the outer lens and then break that surround inside of it, but then it would have to break this top housing off down to probably here and over to here, and that's screwed in. So that would have been something with a lot of leverage. And that's where I always thought maybe a long crowbar or a long screwdriver or a Halliger that fire departments use. It was something long and strong and pointed. I wish they would have talked about that. That scratch. There is nothing on a human body that would scratch the inside of that taillight in such a way. And you got to think, if it was being hit, the taillight pieces are going to be in the way, so they're not going to do it. Nothing on the body would do it, because there would be taillight in between the arm and the plastic, and the plastic's not going to leave that kind of scratch. It would have had to have been something metal. There we go. A view of it. All of those water spots inside of it, or salt spots and debris from inside the road. The taillight would have definitely had water that poured out of it.
I want to ask you a couple of questions about that diffuser. If you could focus your attention on this area. Describe for the jurors what they're looking at in terms of the diffuser. What is the diffuser?
Right, let me see if this. So the diffusers, right where my mouse is, there's a clear diffuser that runs along the bottom, and then there's another diffuser that runs along here, and then that also goes up vertically. So this piece was missing and fractured on the bottom, along with the vertical portion. The chrome piece here you can see is also fractured and damaged, and then the kind of the second tier, if you will, that clear diffuser was also fractured and broken on the upper section as well.
Was that of significance to you in your review of the damage to the taillight?
Yes.
Why?
Well, because that tells me that we have to have enough force and energy to break, we talked about earlier that 5 millimeter thick red outer lens. We have to have enough force to be able to get beyond that to now start penetrating into the interior components of the taillight to get to, again, those clear diffusers, and certainly cause damage to get induced out the back end of the taillight as well.
You said you chose 24 miles per hour because that was about the speed at the end of that 10 seconds.
Correct.
You do realize at the end of that 10 seconds, the car, the defendant's Lexus, was going faster. It was still accelerating, don't you?
From what I recall, the last data point, I believe the throttle was still around 74%.
Well, ARCCA specializes in tech stream data, don't they?
Yes.
Okay. So you are looking at that, you would agree that at the end of the 10 seconds, the defendant's Lexus was increasing in speed.
This is another of Hank's half-truths. The truth is, the vehicle was actually slowing down. The accelerator was at 74.4, then it went to 74. The miles per hour actually started dropping the last PID. Also, the trigger data doesn't make sense because there's an extra line of data. If you count it, there's 5 on one side and 6 on the other side of the trigger. And the trigger is the one that shows the mileage, which is another red herring, if you ask me, because they're not showing 1/10 of a mile. But the trigger event could have happened anywhere. They could have used the exemplar Lexus and caused the trigger event and just taken the hex code and put it into the other computer, or they could have swapped modules. So there's a number of different ways to get it. At this point, what I do know is the trigger data did not happen in front of 34 Fairview on the 29th of January 2022. This could have happened anytime. This is most likely from the driveway. And if they would have originally gotten the data from TechStream through the infotainment center, it would have had time and date with the event trigger.
Well, we don't know, again, beyond that data point what the data is.
At the end of that 10 seconds, the car was going up, not down, in speed, yes?
Correct.
And you can't tell how much longer that car traveled for after that 10 seconds, can you?
Correct, we don't know.
So when you chose the 24 miles per hour, it was just based on a data point. It wasn't based on you believing that there was an impact at a certain speed, was it?
No, and the triggering event itself it's not a collision by definition, and nowhere in that data can you parse out whether or not any contact even occurred.
We know that.
Okay.
The point is, you can't tell how fast the vehicle was going if it was in a collision from that data, can you?
Sorry, can you repeat the question?
If that vehicle was in a collision, you wouldn't be able to tell from that data what the speed was at the time of the collision.
If contact allegedly occurred at some point in that data set, no, you would not be able to pick a row in that data and say, this is where the collision occurred.
Or after that data set, you would have no idea.
Outside of the data?
Yes.
No.
Okay. And so when you look at this experiment that you did, if you were to add, you said 24 miles per hour, but that's not considering the 26%. If you were to add 7 more miles per hour to this collision, would you expect more damage to that right taillight?
Potentially, yes, but you're certainly getting into the realm of injury at that point.
I'm not asking about that.
Hank certainly doesn't want the truth. He just wants to make the jury believe something that is not even possible. The injury to the arm would be significantly greater at a higher speed than it already is, because there would already be broken bones. And Hank just doesn't want the jury to know that fact. And because he doesn't like the answer, he has to get rude, which hopefully the jury sees through it. But he keeps saying take off 26%. You wouldn't take off 26% of the speed. The speed's going to be the same. Hank keeps saying you have to slow the truck down because of the 26% difference in weight. The weight was only 1.5 pounds. That is not enough to make a difference. Not on the truck or the arm.
I'm asking you a simple question about damage. If you were to add 7 miles per hour onto this test here, would you expect more damage to that right rear taillight?
Yes.
Okay, can you finish the video?
In terms of the impact speed?
Yes, the impact speed can change the result of this, of the damage to the right rear taillight, can it?
Correct.
And the angle of the arm can change the damage to that right rear taillight, can't it?
It can, yes.
Did you take any pictures of the debris field after the impact and damage in this test E? Did you take any photographs of the debris field?
Let's talk about debris field for a minute, because Hank is trying to say that the debris field exploded out like a mushroom cloud and went in all directions, when in fact the debris field kind of follows the straight path behind the vehicle. It doesn't go off to the sides, but not more than a couple of inches. So he's trying to make it sound like the debris field is going to fly off in all directions, feet. And it does not do that. It kind of goes in a linear straight line and a little bit out to the side, but not much like he says.
It should have been in all of the test materials that was provided, yes.
Was the debris field within a certain range? Was it within a certain circle, 10, 20, 30 feet?
That sounds about right.
And so a debris field, although it might scatter, it almost forms kind of a ring, doesn't it?
It can, yes.
And it can form that ring away from where the body lands, can't it?
It can, yes.
And in this test, which you say is 24 miles per hour, without the reduction to 17.8 miles per hour, in this test, upon impact, there is a number of pieces of taillight that shatter, isn't there?
Yes.
Did you count how many?
About 19 pieces.
19 pieces. Could you move forward just a little bit? And when they break and scatter, some of them go up, some go down. Stop, please. Yes?
Correct, yes.
Some of them come in contact with Randy's arm. Yes?
Correct.
Now, Randy being on a harness, it's not like real life when the Lexus goes by, could continue to push him with it, right? He can't go with the car or the Lexus because he's on a harness.
Couple of things to notice when the car hits Randy is, number one, even with his little bitty ankles, his shoes stay on. And two, while it would cause Randy to spin, it's not going to spin and throw him. You can tell by the impact it was going to spin him maybe 1 or 2 times, and he was going to hit the ground directly soon after. He wasn't going to fly through the air, or he would have flown through the air here, because the harness is only holding him up. It's not holding him down. And the taillight pieces are going directly toward the ground and backwards a little bit, but they are not flying in a circle. They're not like in a mushroom cloud like Hank's trying to say, a 30-foot radius. Look closely at the taillight pieces. They are going out and they are already starting to drop toward the ground. Because the taillight pieces are heavy, they're not going to fly very far. He's trying to distract by saying, look at the feet.
These feet,
Yes.
see the right foot?
Yes.
It's twisting, right?
Correct.
Turning. Stop.
Here goes another distraction. Let's look at the actual shoe. This is nothing but a distraction to distract the jury and make them think about John.
When you were reaching your conclusions that you offered to the jury today, did you consider this photograph?
No.
Did you know that this sneaker was up against a curb in the area?
Yes.
And you didn't consider this at all?
The sneaker that could have easily been placed there with a black bottom, and John's was white, but this one looks black to me. It always has. But this could have been placed in the snow relatively easy. Somebody could have pulled a car up, stuck their arm out, wiggled the shoe in the snow, and pulled away.
Wasn't a part of my analysis.
Okay. You can go back to the video. You see the spin and rotation on the foot?
Yes.
Can you keep going?
Now notice the rotation isn't really that fast, and look at his foot. His foot gets trapped under the wheel, gets ran over by the car tire, and the shoe still stays on those little bitty ankles. Can you imagine that?
You would agree there can be a clip of a pedestrian that causes significant damage to a taillight where the pedestrian incurs no lower body injuries whatsoever. That can happen, can it?
Well, I don't know that I would describe this as a clip to the arm. This is a full-on impact to the arm, so it's not a clip. Again, you saw at the 15 miles per hour. I think that's more analogous to a clip or a side swipe where the arm just kind of gets brushed out of the way. This, I would say, is a full-on impact to the arm.
Okay. To use your words, in a full-on impact like this, a pedestrian could...
I think Randy being suspended, it stopped him from hitting the side of the car. You can tell when he rotates. At first, he starts moving toward the car. Now watch the debris field. It ends up going straight back and a little bit to the left, but mostly straight back about 1.5 car length, maybe 1 full car length, straight back into the ground. So that means all of the debris would be closer to the mailbox. There would have been no debris further down toward where John was. It should have all been up toward the mailbox. Not all the way to the mailbox, but up that way. So this is another case closed.